Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving deep into something super important, especially if you've got little ones running around.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the connection between nutrition and mental health in kids.
Yeah.
We've got a ton of research papers, articles, even some personal
Oh,
stories
wow.
to dig into. So let's get started.
It's kind of crazy how much more we're seeing mental health stuff pop up like way earlier in childhood.
Right.
Anxiety, depression, things we used to think were just adult problems are now hitting kids.
Yeah, it's definitely worrying.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, what can we do early on to give these kids a better shot at being mentally healthy?
That's where nutrition comes in. It's not just about growing physically, it's like the foundation for a healthy brain. If that foundation's messed up, a kid is just way more likely to have mental health issues.
So you're saying there's a straight up link between what a kid eats and their chances of getting something like anxiety or depression.
There's definitely more and more evidence saying exactly that. There's this one study, the Norwegian mother, father, and child cohort study.
Yeah.
They followed these kids for years, tracking what they ate from pregnancy all the way through early childhood. And guess what? The ones who ate healthier consistently had lower scores on those anxiety and depression tests when they turned 8.
Wow, that's pretty convincing. It sounds like it's not even just about avoiding those vitamin deficiencies or whatever. It's about actively making healthy choices over time.
Exactly.
And
And it shows how powerful early intervention can be. Parents can start building those healthy habits right from the beginning.
speaking of early intervention, one of our sources told this amazing story about a woman named Doris
Oh, yeah?
who basically recovered from schizophrenia
Wow.
after she started a ketogenic diet.
Doris's case is like a perfect example of how changing your diet can seriously impact mental health. Of course, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, but it shows that what we eat can really mess with how our brains work.
It reminds me of that story about a kid who had all these behavior problems,
Mm-hmm.
and then they took gluten out of his diet. He got so much better.
Right.
This brings us to that whole gut-brain connection thing.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about it these days. Tell us more about how what's going on in our stomachs can affect what's happening up in our heads.
It's wild, right? We used to think the gut was just for digestion.
Right.
But now we know it's constantly talking to the brain, messing with everything from our moods to how we think.
And the craziest part is that something like 90% of the body's serotonin, that thing that keeps our mood stable,
Mm-hmm.
is actually made in the gut.
It's insane, isn't it?
And
And that's where nutrition comes back in. All those tiny microbes living in our gut.
okay.
They need the nutrients and fiber we eat to make those mood-regulating chemicals.
So basically, a healthy gut from a healthy diet is setting the stage for a healthy mind.
Hmm.
So like we're feeding those little factories in our stomachs that pump out happy chemicals.
I love that analogy. And it's even more important for kids because their brains are still growing.
Yeah.
And they're way more sensitive to any nutritional imbalances.
So let's talk about those brain foods. What are the superstars we should be loading up on to help our kids' mental health?
Okay, so first up, we've got omega-3 fatty acids. These are essential fats, which means our bodies can't make them, so we got to get them from food.
Right.
They're super important for building the brain, helping us learn and remember things.
And a bunch of the studies we looked at said that not getting enough omega-3s is linked to a higher risk of ADHD and depression in kids.
Exactly. One study even showed that giving omega-3 supplements helped kids with ADHD focus and pay attention better. It's like giving their brains the premium fuel they need to work, right?
That's amazing.
Mm.
So where can we get these brain-boosting omega-3s?
Fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines, those are the best. For anyone who's not a fish fan, flax seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts are good plant-based choices.
Variety is key. Now, what about those B vitamins? They seem to be involved in tons of brain stuff.
Oh, yeah. B vitamins are like the behind-the-scenes crew of the brain. They support everything from making those mood chemicals to how we use energy. Think of them as the stage managers, making sure the actors are in place and the lights are working.
I like that. And one article mentioned that not having enough of certain B vitamins, especially B12 and folate, can make anxiety and depression worse.
That's true. And it's not just about mood. B vitamins are crucial for how well our brains work, too. Studies have shown that kids who get enough B vitamins actually do better in school.
So we're talking about better focus, better memory, just better brain power overall.
You got it. And luckily, B vitamins are in a ton of different foods. Leafy green veggies are great, and so are eggs, meat, poultry, fish, whole grains, and beans.
Sounds like a balanced diet is the best brain food ever. Now, I remember one source mentioned iron, and how it affects mood and energy levels. How did that work?
Iron is super important for carrying oxygen throughout the body,
Okay,
and the brain uses a ton of oxygen. When kids don't get enough iron, they get tired, which messes with their mood and concentration.
makes sense.
They might get cranky, have trouble focusing, and even struggle to learn new things.
So it's not just physical fatigue, but mental and emotional fatigue too.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised how common iron deficiency is, especially in little kids and teenagers.
So what are some good ways to fight that? What should we be eating?
Red meat is a great source of heme iron, which is the kind our bodies absorb best. You can also get iron from beans, lentils, spinach, and fortified cereals.
Awesome. So we've got our omega-3s, our B vitamins, and iron all playing a part in keeping those brains healthy and happy.
Yep, and we're not done yet. We can't forget about vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin.
That's the one our bodies make from sunlight,
You
right?
got it. And it plays a big role in regulating mood and how well our brains work. Studies have linked low vitamin D to a higher risk of depression and anxiety in kids.
So those sunny days aren't just good for our souls, they're good for our brains too.
Exactly. And while getting outside is the best way to boost vitamin D, we can also get it from some foods like fatty fish egg yolks and fortified dairy products.
So plenty of options to keep those brains sunny even when it's cloudy. Now, last but not least, let's talk about magnesium. I read somewhere that it's like a natural chill pill for the nervous system.
Haha, that's a great way to put it. Magnesium helps calm the nervous system down and keeps those stress hormones in check. It also helps make GABA, which is a brain chemical that makes us feel relaxed.
So it's like the brain's built-in way to chill out.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And for kids who tend to get anxious or stressed, making sure they get enough magnesium can be a big help.
Got it. And for those picky eaters out there, what are some good sources of magnesium?
Nuts and seeds are awesome sources, and so are leafy green veggies, avocados, and even dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate. Now you're talking.
Right. Who knew a delicious treat could be good for your brain, too?
This is all so fascinating. We've covered a ton of ground from that whole gut-brain connection to all those key nutrients that keep kids' brains healthy and happy.
And we're just getting started. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some specific diets and give you some practical tips on how to get those brain-boosting foods into your kids' diet.
Can't wait.
Welcome back, everyone. So we left off talking about how different diets can actually affect kids' mental health. We were talking about Doris and how much a ketogenic diet helped her.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing story, but it also kind of makes you wonder, where do you even start with all these different diets? It can be overwhelming.
It's true. It can be a lot. That's why it's so important to talk to the experts, like registered dietitians or nutritionists who specialize in kids' mental health. They can figure out what each kid needs, recommend the right approaches, and even make personalized meal plans.
So it's not something you should just try to figure out on your own. You need expert help to sort through all the complicated stuff.
Exactly. Okay, so let's dig into one approach that's been getting a lot of attention lately, the ketogenic diet.
The keto diet, right? It's all about those good fats.
It's more than just good fats. It's actually a high-fat, very low-carb diet that basically changes how your body uses energy. Instead of using glucose from carbs, it uses ketones.
Hold on, break that down for me. What are ketones and how do they affect the brain?
So ketones are made by the liver when there's not enough glucose around, which comes from carbs. They basically become a backup fuel source for the brain and the body. And get this, research is showing that ketones might actually be a better energy source for the brain, leading to sharper thinking and maybe even a more stable mood.
So by cutting carbs and eating more healthy fats, we're kind of switching the brain's power source to something that could work better for some kids.
That's the idea.
Hmm.
And there's more and more evidence that the keto diet can be really helpful for kids with certain conditions like epilepsy, autism, even ADHD.
But I bet this kind of diet takes a lot of planning and watching, especially for kids who are still growing.
Mhm.
What are some things to keep in mind?
You're right. It's definitely not something to jump into without thinking. It's super important to work with a doctor or dietitian to make sure the kid's getting all the nutrients they need and to avoid any problems. Like they'll make sure they're getting enough fiber, which can be low on a keto diet, and they'll watch out for any nutrient deficiencies.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, getting the benefits, but also making sure it's safe and meets the kid's individual needs.
Exactly. Now let's switch gears and talk about another approach, the elimination diet.
From what I've heard, the elimination diet is like playing detective with food, trying to find those specific foods that might be causing problems.
You got it. It's different from food allergies, which happen right away and are usually pretty obvious. Food sensitivities take longer to show up, and they can cause all sorts of weird symptoms like tummy trouble, skin problems, headaches, feeling tired, and yep, even changes in mood and behavior.
So we're talking about those annoying symptoms that can really affect a kid's life, even if they're not super serious.
Exactly. And because the symptoms can be so different and take a while to show up, it can be really hard to figure out what's causing them.
So how does the elimination diet actually work?
Basically, you cut out the foods you think might be causing problems for a few weeks usually, and then you slowly add them back in one at a time while watching for any changes in symptoms.
It's like a process of taking things out and putting them back in, carefully watching to see what happens.
Right. Some common culprits are gluten, dairy, soy eggs, corn,
Even some of those food additives. If the symptoms get better when you take a food out and then come back when you add it back in, that's a good sign there might be a sensitivity.
And once you figure out what's causing the sensitivity, you just avoid or limit that food to keep the symptoms away.
Exactly. And it's crazy how even small sensitivities can really mess with a kid's mental and emotional well-being. One of our sources mentioned this kid whose anxiety and irritability went way down after they took dairy out of his diet.
It's amazing how those hidden food triggers can be messing things up without us even knowing.
It really shows how important it is to pay attention to how each kid reacts to different foods. What works for one might not work for another, and that's why this personalized approach with help from a doctor or dietitian is so important.
Now, we've been talking about specific diets, but let's talk about the big issue when it comes to kids' nutrition processed foods. They're everywhere, and let's be real, they're marketed directly at kids. It's true. All those bright colors, can be jingles, and cartoon characters are hard to resist even for us adults sometimes. But the problem is that these processed foods are often packed with sugar, unhealthy fats, artificial colors, flavors, and preservatives, things our bodies don't need. And that can actually be bad for both our physical and mental health.
And it's not just candy bars and soda.
Nope. We're talking about packaged snacks, breakfast cereals, even those things that seem healthy, like granola bars and fruit juices that are trying to trick us into thinking they're good for us.
So how do these processed foods specifically affect mental health?
Well, research has linked them to a bunch of mental health problems in kids, like anxiety, depression, hyperactivity, even aggressive behavior.
Hmm.
There are a few things going on here. One is the blood sugar roller coaster they can cause, those sugar highs and crashes.
Oh yeah, I know all about those.
Yep.
Those ups and downs are no fun for anyone, especially kids who are still learning to control their emotions.
Exactly. Those quick changes can make them moody, irritable, and have trouble focusing. And then there are the bad fats in a lot of processed foods, which can mess with how their brains develop and work.
So those harmless looking snacks can actually have a real impact on a kid's mental and emotional state.
And that's not all. Some research even says that those artificial food colors and flavors might make some kids hyperactive and cause behavior problems.
So it's not just about what's missing from these processed foods like nutrients, it's also about what they add that can be harmful.
You got it. It's a
Right.
double whammy.
Yeah.
And don't forget about what they do to the gut microbiome. Processed foods usually don't have much fiber, which those good bacteria need to thrive, and they can even bring in bad bacteria that mess up the balance in the gut.
So it's like creating a bad environment for those good bacteria that we need for so many things, including mental health.
Exactly. And when the gut's out of balance, it can send signals to the brain, leading to all sorts of mental health symptoms.
This is all pretty convincing proof that we need to be careful about the processed foods our kids are eating.
Absolutely. It's not about saying all processed foods are evil. Some are worse than others, and some can even be part of a healthy diet. It's all about paying attention, reading labels, and making smart choices.
So instead of that box of colorful cereal,
Go for some oatmeal with fresh berries and nuts.
instead of that packaged food snack,
Give them a piece of whole fruit or some veggie sticks with hummus.
and instead of that sugary juice box,
Fill up a reusable water bottle with plain water and add a squeeze of lemon or some cucumber for flavor.
it's about making those small changes that can make a big difference for a kid's overall health and well-being.
Exactly. And remember, nobody's perfect. It's about progress, not perfection. Every step we take toward feeding our kids' bodies and minds in a healthy way is a step in the right direction.
So true. Now, before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, I want to talk about something that comes up a lot. Supplements. I know a lot of parents wonder if supplements are necessary, especially if their kids are picky eaters.
Supplements can definitely be helpful if a kid's not getting enough of a certain nutrient or if they have specific needs. But it's important to remember that supplements can't replace a healthy diet.
So the most important thing is a balanced, nutrient-rich diet with supplements as a backup if needed.
Exactly. For example, omega-3 supplements can be good for kids who don't eat a lot of fatty fish. And vitamin D supplements might be necessary for kids who don't get enough sunlight or who have darker skin.
It's about figuring out what each kid needs.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to talk to a doctor before giving any supplements to kids. They can figure out if supplements are necessary, recommend the right amount, and make sure there aren't any problems with other medications or side effects.
Safety first, always. Now, before we wrap up this part, I want to touch on something we hear from parents all the time. The struggle of getting their kids to actually eat those healthy foods. We can't exactly force feed them broccoli, right?
You're so right. It's not about forcing them, it's about creating a positive and encouraging environment around food.
So how do we do that? How do we turn mealtime from a battle into something everyone enjoys?
One good strategy is to get the kids involved as much as possible. Let them help plan meals, go grocery shopping, even prepare the food.
It's about making them part of the process instead of just giving them food.
Exactly. When kids feel like they have a say in what they eat, they're more likely to want to make healthy choices.
Gives them a sense of ownership and control.
Exactly. Another important thing is making mealtime a family thing. Sitting down together without any distractions and just enjoying the meal together can make a huge difference.
It's not just about eating, it's about connecting, sharing, and making food a positive experience.
Absolutely. It's a chance to show them how to eat healthy, have meaningful conversations, and create those special family moments that they'll remember.
And speaking of making food enjoyable, one of our sources talk about the importance of making it fun.
Oh, that's so true. Kids love bright colors, interesting textures, and fun shapes. We can use that to our advantage by making healthy food look and feel appealing.
So instead of just plain steamed broccoli,
We can roast it with some Parmesan cheese or serve it with a yummy dip.
or instead of boring carrot sticks.
We can make colorful veggie skewers or turn zucchini into fun noodles with a spiralizer.
It's all about being creative and thinking outside the box.
Exactly. We can even get kids involved in growing their own food. Even a little herb garden can make them more interested in what they're eating.
It's about making those connections from the garden to the table and helping them appreciate where their food comes from.
Exactly. And don't forget about the power of storytelling. We can make food more exciting by telling them stories about where it comes from, how it's grown, and even what it means in different cultures.
It's like turning those boring vegetables into exciting food adventures.
That's the spirit.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. We've talked about so much, from specific diets to practical tips for making mealtime a positive experience.
And in the next part, we're going to dive into something that's often overlooked, food sensitivities, and how they can affect kids' mental health. Stay tuned for more.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've covered so much about how nutrition sets the stage for kids' mental well-being, from those important brain-boosting nutrients
Yeah.
to looking at specific diets. Now we're going to explore something that can be a bit of a mystery. Those food sensitivities.
Yeah.
They're not like allergies, which are immediate and obvious. Sensitivities can be sneaky
Right.
and show up in subtle ways.
Totally. And one of the sources talked about how different the symptoms can be, everything from tummy issues and skin problems to headaches, feeling tired,
Yeah,
and even changes in mood and behavior.
it's true. And those behavioral and emotional changes are what we're really interested in today. Like, imagine a kid who gets irritable or anxious or can't focus after eating certain foods.
Right.
Those could be signs of a food sensitivity messing with their mental well-being.
Exactly. It's like a hidden puzzle trying to connect those seemingly random dots.
Right. So how do we even start to figure this out? What
Huh?
are some of the usual suspects we should be looking for?
Well, gluten and dairy are two of the big ones. Gluten is a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye.
Okay.
And dairy is milk and all those milk products.
Yeah.
Being sensitive to those can cause all sorts of symptoms, not just the obvious stomach problems.
One of the studies we read mentioned this kid whose behavior totally changed when they took gluten out of his diet. His parents had no clue that his tantrums and irritability could be from something he was eating.
It's crazy how those connections can go unnoticed for so long. And it really shows why it's so important to talk to a doctor or a dietitian if you think your kid might have a food sensitivity. They can help you figure out what's going on,
Yeah.
recommend tests, and guide you through that process of taking foods out and adding them back in.
Speaking of testing, one article mentioned that there's no single perfect test for food sensitivities. It often takes a few different approaches.
That's true. Sometimes blood tests can find antibodies that are related to certain food sensitivities, but they're not always accurate. Keeping a food diary is super helpful, writing down everything your kid eats and any symptoms that come up after.
Right.
And then there's the elimination diet, which we talked about before, where you cut out certain foods and then add them back in one by one to see what happens.
It's like being a detective gathering all those clues to find the culprits.
Exactly. And once you find those triggers, the next step is figuring out how to handle them. Sometimes it means avoiding the food completely.
Okay.
Other times it might be about limiting how much they eat or finding other options.
It's all about finding that balance, minimizing exposure, but still having a variety of foods.
Right. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk about artificial food dyes and additives and how they might affect kids' behavior. Some parents are convinced their kids go bonkers after eating those brightly colored treats.
It's true. So what's the verdict on that?
There's definitely been a lot of research on this. And while the results are kind of mixed, some studies have shown a connection between artificial food colors and hyperactivity in certain kids.
So it's not a sure thing, but it's
No.
something to keep in mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if a kid's already having trouble with behavior or attention reducing or cutting out artificial food dyes, might be worth trying along with other lifestyle changes.
It's about minimizing those potential triggers and seeing what happens.
Right. Now we can't talk about kids' mental health and food without talking about sugar.
Of course.
It's everywhere, and it's so tempting, not just for kids, but for all of us.
It really is. Sugar has this crazy way of making us want more and more.
And that's because sugar makes our brains release dopamine,
Okay.
which is a chemical that makes us feel good. But the problem is that this reward system can get overloaded, leading to those intense cravings and even behaviors that look like addiction.
So it's not just the empty calories and the risk of cavities.
Mhm.
Sugar can actually mess with the brain's wiring
Yeah,
and contribute to all sorts of mental and emotional problems.
exactly. Eating a lot of sugar has been linked to mood swings, anxiety, depression, even aggression in kids. Those quick spikes and crashes in blood sugar can make their emotions go haywire.
And don't forget, sugar is hidden in so many processed foods, from breakfast cereals to yogurt to those snacks that are supposed to be healthy but are actually loaded with sugar.
It's true. It's sneaky and makes it so hard for parents to choose healthy foods at the grocery store.
So what can we do? Are we saying kids can never have cookies or cake?
I don't think it's about never having those things. It's about balance and making smart choices.
Yeah.
Choosing whole foods over processed ones, limiting sugary drinks, and offering healthier alternatives to those sweet treats can make a huge difference.
It's about having a healthy relationship with food where those treats are okay once in a while.
Exactly. And involving kids in those choices, teaching them how sugar affects their bodies and minds can help them make healthier decisions on their own.
It's about giving them the knowledge and the power to make good choices about food throughout their lives.
Absolutely. And remember, parents are the biggest role models. Kids are always watching us.
Right.
So when we make healthy choices, it shows them what to do.
It's about practicing what you preach.
Exactly. And this brings us back to something we've talked about a lot, the importance of getting advice from the experts.
Yeah.
Every kid is different, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to food and mental health.
So if a parent is worried about their child's mental health, where should they start?
The first step is to talk to their pediatrician or doctor.
Okay.
They can help figure out what's going on, rule out any other medical problems, and refer them to specialists if needed. That might be a child psychologist or psychiatrist for the mental health stuff, and a registered dietitian or nutritionist who specializes in kids' mental health to look at their diet.
So it's about building a team of experts who can work together with the parents
Yes.
to come up with a plan that meets the child's specific needs.
Exactly. And parents are the most important part of that team. They know their kids better than anyone and can give really valuable information about their eating habits, behavior, and how they're developing. It's all about working together to find what works best for each child.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. We've explored how connected what we feed our kids is to how their minds and emotions develop.
We've learned about the power of those key nutrients that boost brain health, looked at different diets, uncovered the mysteries of food sensitivities, and tackled those tough questions about processed foods and sugar.
But most importantly, we've discovered that we have more control than we might think when it comes to supporting our kids' mental well-being through the food choices we make every day.
Each meal, each snack is a chance to give them the tools they need to build a healthy and happy life.
It's about giving them the power to thrive, to reach their full potential, and to face whatever life throws at them with strength and joy.
It's amazing how food is so much more than just fuel. It's the foundation for a strong mind and spirit.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible deep dive.
Yeah, this is great.
We hope you learned a lot and feel inspired to make those healthy choices for the kids in your lives.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep learning and keep those young minds thriving.